Hey, yo, I feel like talking my shit. 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 Hey.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to 50 Shades of Red podcast. I'm your host, Naomi. And tonight we're joined by a Instagram friend of mine, hopefully friend in real life, Curlin. Curlin, I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself and kind of a little bit about your background and where you're from. And then we're going to get started on tonight's discussion, which is pretty much the Ahmaud Arbery situation and its impact on politics and the general culture in America right now.
Okay, so my name is Curlin Hippolyte. I'm an attorney, barred in New Jersey. I practice law in New Jersey, and I practice immigration law, and I also practice criminal defense.
Okay, and do you want to drop any of your social medias or contacts?
Oh, yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram, Hippolyte Law. That's HYPPOLITELAW. It's a pretty long Instagram handle, but if you have the time to follow me on there, you'll find some great gems on there.
Okay. So we're going to start this discussion off. I'm going to just play two videos, and I'm going to give you a warning. They're graphic, but these are the videos that have been circulating around the media. And I want to just send my condolences out to everybody that's been affected by this tragedy. And no, not the coronavirus, by this hateful incident. Many lives were affected, including, the Arbery family. But I know that neighborhood in general, is up in arms and divided right now. So I'm sending my prayers to them. And I don't in any way intend on capitalizing off of this poor man's, demise. So I'm not displaying the videos for that reason. I'm just doing it because, like many people in America today, we're not watching the news. We're watching Netflix. So just, give me a minute. I'm going to put those two up and then we'll get right into the discussion. So just 1 second. That is the alternative narrative being spun by the media to combat the first video we've seen of this man pretty much being hunted down like a dog. So, Curlin, I'm going to just yield the floor to you. What was your initial impression of the first video, and then again in the second cycle of the second video?
So when I first saw that first video, I was taken aback by it. I thought, man, this is crazy. And the first time I saw it was when everyone was talking about, this guy was shot while he was jogging. And so when you actually see the video, it's a really shocking video. You see two people in trucks and they have these, big weapons, and, they end up shooting this man. And it was a shocking video. So I was taken aback by it. I had to go for a run right after that video, and that was all I could think about. So it definitely was an impactful video. The second video, this was my first time seeing. That was Ahmaud Arbery in the second video.
Yes, it was. I believe the timeline was a little iffy that the Guardian posted, but I believe it was like within the last few years, I know for a fact, there was really no premise behind what occurred there. Apparently, they bring up his criminal record, which I'm not going to do here. I didn't even go into it because it's not relevant. But yeah, hopefully, actually, I'm going to see if I can get that video back up just because I had a little bit of an issue like running it.
Yeah. Well,
and I'm pretty sure if you haven't seen it, that means a lot of people probably haven't seen it.
Yeah. But I do agree with you that it is irrelevant. I think a lot of people are trying to bring up his past as a way to justify what happened on that day. And I think that is irrelevant. So
it honestly is. Roland Martin commercial keeps playing every time I go to this video. It's so annoying. This guy is so annoying. I can't even fast forward it. Jesus, I can't do it. Okay. Yeah, we're just not going to get that video. I can't do it. But yeah, so I don't know. I think it's when I first seen the video, I was kind of like many people. I was a little bit confused. I watched it and I was like, well, okay, they're saying he was jogging, you know. I don't care what you jog in. I mean, I don't jog in like running gear either. So, okay, that could be true. And then more information came out saying, oh, you know, it was kind of a home that was being redone or restructured. And he was just looking and then he ran away from the scene. Well, I built my home and I'm one of the only Black people in this entire neighborhood. So when I was building my home, we did come and like walk into other houses that were being, you know, built and they were like 80% done. And we would just go in and look around and get ideas for our house. And one time when our house was partially built, we came in to look at our own house and one of the neighbors stopped dead in the street. And he ended up becoming our friend, but he was like, hey, what are you guys doing? And I'm like, oh, great. He's seen us Negroes over here, like, you know, trying to figure out if we're trying to rob people and shit. But, you know, we ended up becoming friends like, no, hey, we're buying this house. And he was like, oh, okay. But it's not uncommon, you know, for neighbors to be like, oh, is that the new neighbor? You know, because when new builds are happening, that's what you do. You go inside of them, you say, oh, is that the new neighbor? But apparently these guys that shot him, the McMichaels, they're saying that there had been 6 or 7 break-ins prior. The police later said there was only one break-in, and that was about 2 months prior to the incident. They said that they had seen him on different cameras around that same house multiple times. None of that has been, you know, substantiated by any real evidence that has been released to the public. So that is a little bit of history on why they felt they were justified in doing a citizen's arrest or self-defense. Now, here's where it gets a little bit, you know, interesting, I guess. So initially, when they were first brought in for questioning, McMichael, we're just going to call him the senior, the older one, he was actually an investigator in the DA's office. That was his previous job. And so they said that he, you know, knew many people there. So when this incident occurred and they kind of just brushed it under the rug because he said it was self-defense. After mainstream media picked it up, he changed the narrative and said it was not self-defense. It was a citizen's arrest. They went through about 3 or 4 different prosecutors because they said they all had conflicts of interest because they knew the investigator. So that is where we're at now. I want you to briefly, do you know Georgia law? I have it pulled up. I dropped it in the chat box. But for anyone who really quickly wants a snippet of Georgia's criminal procedure, arrest by a private person, it defines it as a private person may arrest an offender if the offense is committed in his presence or within his immediate knowledge. If the offense is a felony and the offender is escaping or attempting to escape, a private person may arrest him upon reasonable and probable grounds of suspicion. So that is what Georgia defines as a citizen's arrest. With that being said, what would you have done?
So it's well, I mean, what would I have done? That's a loaded question. But before I answer that, I'd like to talk about citizen's arrest, right? And you see how the segment says you have to have actual knowledge. It had to have been committed. The crime would have had to been committed in your presence, right? So when this case is going to be adjudicated, that's going to be a big question, right? Was this alleged crime, was it committed in the presence of the people who tried to do the citizen's arrest, right? That's the big question. Now, first, what's the alleged crime? What's the alleged crime? So are they saying the alleged crime was he was planning?
Burglary.
Yeah, he was planning on committing a burglary, right? Well, this place is not necessarily, it's not necessarily a home. Apparently it was a construction site. So if it's not a home, if it's not a dwelling, then there's no burglary, right? But even if it was a home and Ahmaud Arbery was planning to rob the place, even if that was the case, which we don't know if it is, this did not.
He didn't take anything. Yeah,
exactly.
He took nothing.
He didn't take anything. And this plotting to rob, plotting to burglarize, it didn't happen in the presence of the people who shot him, right? At least that's not what the evidence is showing, right? Apparently what happened was they got notification from someone else and they decided to embark on this chase, right? So they're saying it's a citizen's arrest. There's a lot of evidence that suggests that it's not a citizen's arrest. There's a lot of evidence that says that it didn't happen in their presence and they were chasing him down, right? Now, if it's not a citizen's arrest, then the two people, at least the two people who were on the truck, have to go to jail, right? If it's not a citizen's arrest, the two people on the truck, they have to be convicted for felony murder because what they attempted to do was falsely imprison someone, right? False imprisonment. And if false imprisonment in Georgia is a felony, right? And so if while committing a felony, you murder someone, that's felony murder. You see? So
okay.
The false imprisonment thing is going to be a big conversation piece because the analysis you have to make with false imprisonment is, would a reasonable person feel like they were free to leave? You see what I'm saying?
Well, with a gun pointed at you, would you feel like you were free to leave?
Exactly. So now,
yeah,
when you think of, was a false imprisonment committed here, right? Did someone commit false imprisonment? Did someone attempt to false imprison someone? Now you have to think, well, two people, not even two people, three people are chasing someone down. They all have guns. They all have, they're two trucks approaching the individual while he's running. Would Ahmaud Arbery, would a reasonable person feel like they were free to leave? You see?
I would say no.
I would say no too. Now, if you don't feel as if you're free to leave, you have the right to fight to defend yourself. If someone's trying to essentially, kidnap you, if someone's trying to falsely imprison you, you have the right to defend yourself. You have the right to use force to stop yourself from being falsely imprisoned. And if you try to use force.
No, I was going to say, I think the question is, right, for the people who are trying to do the citizen's arrest, are they allowed to use a weapon?
In Georgia, you are allowed to use a weapon. You can have a firearm. You're allowed to open carry. So you're allowed to begin the citizen's arrest with a weapon. Now, again, I just want to put this disclaimer out here. I'm not a Georgia attorney. I'm a New Jersey attorney, but I have reviewed some of these laws. So I feel, that I'm competent to comment on it. So in Georgia's open carry, so if someone's committing a crime in your presence, you can initiate a citizen's arrest while you have a weapon on you. You can do that, right? You can even brandish the weapon and say freeze. You can even do that in Georgia. It's a citizen's arrest. You're allowed to, if you see a crime being committed in front of you, as a citizen, you can brandish your weapon and say freeze. But if you're wrong, if you make a mistake with the citizen's arrest, then you approach false imprisonment. And if you're in false imprisonment zone now, and an innocent person tries to defend themselves, and you shoot that innocent person, then you can't say, "Oh, well, I thought he was committing a crime. I was trying to do a citizen's arrest." That won't be a defense for you. I don't know if that makes sense.
So is it that you can open carry? No, it does. It does. So you can open carry, right? So I can open carry here where I live in Pennsylvania, I can open carry. So at that point, whatever I do while I'm open carrying is just normal, right? It's abiding by the law. Even if I say, hey, stop, and I think you're committing a crime. But at that moment, when Mr. Arbery feels like he cannot leave and he's not free to leave and he wants to stand his ground or defend himself, and now we don't know who initiated, right? The physical part, but he initiates or tries to prevent them from brandishing this gun towards him. Does that then take away the open carry? Does that then say you're engaging in an altercation with a weapon? Does that take away the self-defense too?
So it does take away the self-defense, because what it's like is, if you're committing a crime, right? So an easier example would be if someone's trying to kidnap you, right? If someone's trying to kidnap you, but that person, in their mind, they don't think they're trying to kidnap you. They think that they're trying to bring you to the authorities, right? They think that you're the wanted person. They look at you, they think you're the wanted individual, and they try to take you to the authorities, right? So they have their gun and they say freeze, right? And they put you in the back of the truck and they try to take you to the authorities. But the whole time they have a gun pointed at you, right? If you attack that person and that person ends up shooting you, that person then can't say, I was just trying to do a citizen's arrest. I should not be punished, right? I did not commit a crime, right? In many jurisdictions, there's strict liability. So it's what the law does is, if you're trying to do a citizen's arrest, the law puts a high burden on the person doing the citizen's arrest, which means you have to be 100% sure, because if you're wrong and the person you're trying to arrest is actually innocent and you kill that person because the person is entitled to fight for their freedom, if you end up killing that person, then you're liable for felony murder in some jurisdictions where false imprisonment is a felony. You see?
Okay, got it.
Because otherwise it wouldn't make sense. I mean, imagine you can just walk down the street, you see someone gardening, and you think they're choking someone, and you say, freeze, I'm trying to do a citizen's arrest on you, and that person fights you because you're pointing a gun at them. They fight you, you kill that person, and then you get to go to court and say, I was just committing a citizen's arrest. No, what the law does in many situations is it places a high burden. So you have the right to engage in a citizen's arrest, but in most jurisdictions, you have to be 100% sure, because if you're wrong, you're strictly liable for the negative outcomes that come from you attempting the citizen's arrest. It's like, if you want to act like a police officer, then you're going to be held to the high standard that we should hold law enforcement officers to.
Got it. And I think it's important to note too that the president of the Georgia Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, he gave a statement basically saying that it's not lawful. You can't detain somebody and then use force. So pretty much exactly what you just said, right? You can't initiate a detainment and then use physical force, especially when that detainment wasn't done correctly in the first place. Mm-hmm. And this type of law in Georgia was actually started, I believe, in the 1800s, when there wasn't a stable police force or system put in place. So the law is very archaic in that sense. And I think they're going to, clearly try to go for abolishing it, probably in the near future. But with that being said, you referenced police officers, and I did send you the videos of ex-officer Brandon Tatum, who is a pretty, emphasis on the ex, pretty prominent figure in the conservative arena to some people. And he's released countless videos, countless statements on Instagram and Twitter, essentially saying that this person, Ahmaud Arbery, was a criminal, and that this behavior is not out of the norm for him, and that many people in the neighborhood know of him frequenting, houses, and basically saying that he would have shot him too, right? So as a lawyer, as just a regular Black male, living on the East Coast, which, we're pretty aggressive people over here, I think. We really are. How do you feel about police officers trying to spread rhetoric to the public as it relates to interpreting laws? Are you for that? Do you believe that police officers are well versed in the law?
Well, I think that the law it's a complicated thing. Even some lawyers, even judges, don't understand the law all the time, right? The law, that's why they call it the practice of law. It's something that everyone is constantly seeking a way to understand better. Judges get overturned all the time. These are people who went to school for many years, Ivy League schools, and sometimes they make decisions that are wrong, right? So I think that if judges who are supposed to be some of the most learned people in the law can make mistakes, then definitely someone who is a law enforcement officer can also make mistakes too, right? And sometimes their mistakes may be more egregious because they don't have the formal legal training. They are trained to enforce the law, but they're not trained to understand the law in the way that lawyers and judges are trained to do so.
I think that was very well put. They're enforcers, not understanders.
Yeah, you know. But I saw the video. Like I said, when you sent me the video, I was like, man, this guy is really, he's really jumping out the window here, He's jumping out the window. But then I thought more about it and I'm like, okay, he's an entertainer. He's selling merchandise. He's trying to, he's asking for comments and clicks and likes and shares and subscribe, right? So it's like somebody like that, are they really trying to have a deep conversation about it, or are they trying to just get a viral moment?
I think you're right. I don't think there was any deep conversation to be had. What do you think race plays a part in this shooting? From what you can see from just like the media and the response of the community and things like that, is race a factor, or were these guys just gung ho to shoot somebody?
I think race. I think anyone who says race does not play a factor in this situation is being somewhat naive. The guy's running in Georgia. He's black. The people who shoot him are older white males. For a long time, the investigation seems to kind of have stalled for a little bit. People only start to get arrested when social media gets up in arms. And I think most people will agree that had the races been changed a little bit, the whole dynamic would have been different. And I don't think you have to be a conservative, a Republican, a Democrat, a liberal person to come to that conclusion. That obviously that a lot of the ways that this thing played out was because he was black, right? And had he been, if he was a woman, it could have been different. If he was white, it would have been different. So there are a lot of things that if you change it, the result changes. So.
No, I think that's a good point. If he was a woman, it would have been different. And I say that a lot, pretty much, in regard to mostly every violent incident with the police. Women are treated so much more gentler, in these instances. Half the time I'm doing something I'm not supposed to be doing. No one cares. And I'm pretty sure a lot of women feel that way. That's why I'm not a feminist. I don't want to be treated equally because, this is what happens. We get these people who think they're alpha males and they just go gung ho trying to lock people up. We all give such strong opinions when we're not in those scenarios.
Absolutely.
Like we don't feel threatened.
Absolutely.
And we don't know what level of like paranoia these people were at. I know I'm always on a high level of paranoia. It's like post-traumatic stress from being in the hood. Just always are like, who's that? Where's my gun?
And so again, I see where you're coming from. That we all have different things we've been exposed to that make us respond a certain kind of a way when we're in dramatic situations or scary situations. But with those two guys on that truck, they were aggressive. Even if you take the law out of it, right? Let's just take the law out of it and just look at it from a human perspective. This is a guy who was running. You had three of you guys, three of you guys, 2 cars,
one recording,
2 cars, 3 guns. You couldn't give him a fair one. You couldn't all 3 of you try to jump him. You couldn't all 3 try to mob. You guys are 3 grown men.
Yeah.
You had to really get a shotgun. It really is pathetic that you'd have to go that far for one person. They inspected his body.
That the guy being an ex-cop? Do you think the guy being an ex-cop had anything to do with the way he reacted to the situation?
I think that it certainly did. I think that when you're in a position of authority for a very long time, it's easy to think that you're above the law. It's easy to not tolerate disrespect or any perception of disrespect. When you have been that dude for such a long time and someone's coming at you aggressively, it's easy to think, who are you to come at me like this? Don't you know who I am? I'm the ex-cop in this neighborhood. I'm the ex-detective. I'm the
And it sounds like
ex-investigator.
me. That's how I be when I pull my gun.
Well, hey, so people like you, when you have your weapon, I hope there's a registry so I can know. Don't go around her, because if she's having a scary day, I might have to have a funeral. I think in this case, what happened was it was a citizen. It was, if you take his word for it, it was a citizen's arrest gone wrong, right? Because
Okay.
if I was walking down the street and someone tried to, and someone pulled up on me, let's say I'm innocent, and someone pulled up on me, two trucks, three guns, two people, and they say, stop.
Why were you running? Is the question they're gonna say.
Let's say I was running because I just came from stealing. Let's say I just came from stealing. Right? Let's say I just came from stealing, but those people didn't know about it. They didn't know about it. And now they're hearing about it from somebody else, and now they come at me and they say, stop. And I'm looking at these people, they don't have uniforms on. They try to cut me off with their car. I'm going to fight to protect myself. And the law has provisions that protect people who want to defend themselves. If someone tries to arrest you and they don't have the power to arrest you, and you fight, and that person kills you, then you, as the murderer, as the person who pulls the trigger, you should be punished. That's felony murder. That's why the guy who got charged recently, that's why he got charged with felony murder and attempting a false imprisonment.
I know the bystander who recorded the incident was charged as well
Yeah,
with
he was charged.
assisting
He
in the
was he was charged as well, and it's a shame that it took social media for him to be charged, but it makes sense. It makes sense because
because he didn't intervene.
no, not because he didn't intervene. You don't have to intervene to save someone from a negative thing happening to them. But if the two guys who were ahead, if they were trying to falsely imprison him, Ahmaud Arbery, if they were trying to do a citizen's arrest rather, then the guy in the second truck, he was definitely helping them, right?
According to him, he was not helping. He heard the commotion, pulled up, and started recording. He did not speak with, this is according to him, he did not speak with them prior to this event happening.
Okay. Well, then if that's the case, then that's a good defense, right? No one talked to me. I just heard the commotion and I went to go see what's going on. That's a good defense. But if there's evidence that he was helping, if they asked him for help and he wanted to help, then he is wrapped up in this false imprisonment.
So there's this comment, and this is from a news channel, right? A caller called in, and I'm only gonna go ahead and play this comment because it echoes a lot of the things I'm hearing on Twitter.
Let's look at the facts. Let's look at the numbers. 13% of the population is black, 7% is women, 6% is men, probably 2.5% are in the state penitentiaries. But we never ever discuss black crime on white. We never discuss black men raping white women. We never discuss black men robbing white people, because you don't do that. But it's because now it's made national news. A black man has been murdered, and I'm not thinking I have no idea what happened. It looks ugly, but it would have never made national news if a black man had murdered a white man.
The next caller was an older black woman who basically said to Bob, you want to talk about statistics? Let's talk about the statistics for white men in prison compared to black men. And let's talk about the statistics for unlawful shootings by Caucasian people. If we take race out of it, which I don't know if we can, but if we try to take race out of it, then where does it leave us? Does it leave us with this is how Southerners are? You know, what kind of mentality does it put the accused in, I think, is the question here. Because everyone is saying it's a hate crime. They should be charged with a hate crime. I just don't understand that. And I don't get how a lot of conservatives, particularly because I'm seeing it the most from them, can honestly say, like, they're just expressing their Second Amendment rights. They just love their country. They want to protect their land. These are all values we should all be wanting to do. It had nothing to do with race, you know, when everybody that says that later says something about race.
Well, when I saw that, it's something that you can expect that people will that's how you can expect people to respond to something like that. People are emotional about these type of things. But if you take a moment and you take a step back, is it a fair question? Is it a fair question to ask, why do some events get a lot of media attention, and why do some events not get the same level of media attention? I think that question is a reasonable question to ask, but there's a time and place to ask that, right? So obviously the media wants clicks, the media wants conversation, the media wants debate, they want videos to be shared. And there are some stories that they know will generate that type of attention, right? So I always, I do think that the media plays a role in why some of these stories get the traction that they do, and some other stories that are also very painful, very tragic, but because they don't fit the mold that the media is trying to, inflame, then they just dismiss those stories. The media definitely likes to manipulate people's emotions, right? So obviously there are some stories that when they happen, they know that these stories will get more traction. And so they try to magnify those stories because those are the stories that are going to get more clicks and more media attention. So like, for example, if I go outside and I kill 3 people, right? And you go outside and you kill 3 people, which story do you think the media is going to want to run with more?
I would think my story because I'm more attractive.
Exactly. Right? Because my story is what? My story is
pretty
black guy kills 3 people.
I'm just kidding.
If I did that, it'd be like, okay. But your story, now all of a sudden they want to put it on the media. They want it to be on every single blog post. It's going to be on the shade room. Everyone's going to talk about it. So it's the same thing with the the race stuff. It's similar, that people do tend to magnify those stories because they want people to be inflamed. They want people to have, long debates and sharing Instagram videos and Twitter and tweets. But, there's a time, like, again, it's interesting. It's a way to pass the time. But most people you see on these platforms, these brand name people that you see, right, on the internet with all the followers and everything like that, the people who are selling merchandise and things like that, they want to entertain. They're not in it to, it's not a deep conversation about what's really going on here, right? So with the guy asking that question, I don't agree with him, but I understand where that feeling is coming from. But one conversation I'd like to have, I don't know if you have the time for it, is the difference between this case and Trayvon Martin's case, right?
Oh, we have time.
So with Trayvon Martin's case, as we all know, Zimmerman walked away from that situation because there was no video, right?
Yeah.
There was no video. So it was really Zimmerman's word against the world, right? So Zimmerman said that Trayvon Martin was beating me up, right? And that's why I had to shoot, because he was beating me up and I was losing and I had to shoot, because that's what Zimmerman was doing. Zimmerman was doing a citizen's arrest on Trayvon Martin, right? He saw Trayvon Martin around the neighborhood. He called the police. He said, these guys always get away. And Zimmerman tried to do a citizen's arrest on Trayvon Martin. And Zimmerman had a gun. But the way citizen's arrest works is you're allowed to do a citizen's arrest with a weapon. But now if the person who you're trying to arrest goes overboard and then tries to, put you in danger of grave bodily harm and you shoot that person, then you can argue that it's justified, because all I was trying to do was a citizen's arrest, right?
Okay.
But in this case, what makes it different is that there's a video. There's a video that the McMichaels? That the McMichaels were aggressing Arbery, right? That they were the aggressors. In the Trayvon Martin case, there was no video. So Zimmerman says, oh, all I did was say, hey, what are you doing here? All I did was say, hey, what are you doing? And then all of a sudden, he comes and he beats my head against the concrete.
So it was essentially no actual proof of anything.
Exactly.
Where in this case it is.
Exactly. There's more proof, because in Zimmerman's case, he said that Trayvon Martin beat him up, and Zimmerman actually had bruises on his face. Right? After the incident, when he went to the police station, Zimmerman actually had bruises on his face that were consistent with losing a fight, right? So again, you're allowed to go up to somebody with a gun. If you're in a state where it's open carry, you're allowed to walk up to somebody with a gun and say, what are you doing in my neighborhood? You're allowed to do that. Now, if that person then beats your ass, and you're about to lose,
too bad.
You have the right to shoot that person.
No,
I'm just saying legally. Right? Like, it's like a security guard.
But is that? I guess it's state by state, because there was a video of those kids in Walmart like 6 months ago, where there was a bunch of people in Walmart, right, and they were like jumping someone. I think they were teenagers, and somebody pulled out a gun, and they said, "Oh, they're going to be convicted for shooting during a fist fight." There was your life was not in danger, essentially, to have shot them. Well, when it was like 10 against 1.
I haven't seen that video. I do know that you have to use proportional force in self-defense.
Define that.
In many jurisdictions, again, not all jurisdictions, but in many jurisdictions, the force you use has to be proportional, right? So if someone comes at you with a pillow, trying to attack you with a pillow, it seems disproportional to then pull out a weapon, a gun to defend yourself in that situation. You see?
Okay.
And so that's the thing with Trayvon Martin, was the only reason why Zimmerman's attorneys felt comfortable using that defense was because they argued that Zimmerman was going through grave bodily harm, right? When you're going through grave bodily harm, then you can use lethal force. You see? So now in this video, if you take it back to Arbery had no weapon. He had no weapon. It was 3 against 1. What were you afraid of? What was the lethal? What did you think Arbery was going to do to you? You see? What was the lethal danger? What danger were you in?
Do these laws apply? I know you're an immigration lawyer, so I figured I'd ask. Do these laws apply to immigrants or illegal aliens?
Well, I mean, if you're in the United States, whether you are a U.S. citizen or not a U.S. citizen, all the laws apply to you all the same. If you're in a state where you're allowed to purchase a firearm and you're allowed to open carry. If you see a crime being committed in front of you, you have the right to engage in a citizen's arrest, but you better be right. You better be sure that you have the right to do so, because if you're wrong and something bad happens, you can get in a lot of trouble.
And so kind of going forward, now that they're going to try to make this into a two-way thing, Colin Noir posted a couple videos about it where they're basically saying it was just overzealous use of open carry pretty much, right? And now they're attacking the right to open carry in Georgia. I know there's protests lined up and things of that sort to dispute it, and also to get this law, amended or banned permanently. But what do you suggest going forward for people who may be unclear about the law but want to go ahead and open carry?
I'd say that if you live in a state where, again, I'm a New Jersey attorney, but I'd say, in my opinion, if you live in a state where you're allowed to open carry, then you should recognize that you have a lethal weapon on your person, and all your decisions are way more serious when you have a lethal weapon on you. But the right to arrest, the citizen's right to arrest, it's not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Sometimes you have to make a decision. If you see a crime being committed right in front of you, sometimes you have to step up. Sometimes you can't wait for the police, right? And sometimes you have a gun, and sometimes you're in a position to do the right thing. But you have to know your role. You have to know whether or not this is actually something you have the right to do. Because if you're wrong, someone can get hurt. So I wouldn't want to see a world where, citizen's arrest is banned. I wouldn't want to see a ban on citizen's arrest. What I'd like to see is that for people to learn from this situation and say to themselves, wow, if I see a crime being committed and I want to do a citizen's arrest, I better be sure. Because if I'm wrong, it's like, for example, if I see someone committing a crime, if I think I see someone committing a crime and I try to put hands on them, and say, freeze. But this person is actually a fragile person and I break their arm when I grab them. You see? That's my fault now. That's my liability. So whenever you're making these decisions, you have to understand that how the saying goes, with great power comes great responsibility. So
I feel like talking my shit. I feel like
talking my shit.